Welcome to the You Need More Money podcast. I'm your host, Matt Manero, where I come to you every week from my studio in Dallas, Texas. Oh, Elaine. We have so much to talk about today. I mean, really, the idea that somebody can be a one-person business that makes $1 million a year is something that is so foreign to me that we have to spend our time today talking about it. But let me introduce you first. My guest today is former senior editor of Fortune Small Business Magazine and current author of the book, $1 Million One-Person Business, Elaine Pofeldt. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Matt. It's great to be here, and I can tell we're going to have a lot to talk about.
This is so, it's so fascinating to me. It never even dawned on me that this topic, content of your book was even possible until about 3 years ago. I met someone who seemed very successful and happy and balanced. And after she left my office and I called the person who introduced us, I said, wow, she was really great. And he's like, yeah, do you know she has $1 million business? And I go, yeah, it wouldn't surprise me. I mean, she seems, like she's totally on her game. And he's like, yeah, and she has one employee. I said, no kidding. And she lives in Arkansas, in the mountains. I'm like, what? She has one employee, does $1 million a year, lives in Arkansas in the mountains. He's like, and she's the happiest person I know. I'm like, how does that even exist? I have a large company that I busted my butt for 20 plus years to make. Most of it, I've been unhappy. How can someone make $1 million a year, have one employee, and be happy in business? It doesn't even exist as a concept. And then here you are with your book, $1 million one-person business. So we got to get into it.
It's pretty mind-blowing, isn't it, that people can get to 1 million in sales with no employees? But it's actually a function of all the changes that we've had with technology in the last few years. Even though almost none of them are techies in the book, technology has enabled them to be the business owners that they are.
Well, one of the industries that you reference in the book in which this actually is possible is through online training videos and programs, and that's actually what this woman did, right? She built an online program that empowered women to embrace their femininity in the business world, and it took off. And so she literally, her one employee is like an admin assistant that just manages her calendar. So that was my first foray into it. What was your foray into this as a topic that obviously ended up being a book?
Well, Matt, I write a blog for Forbes about the one-person business, and I came across Census Bureau statistics showing that there were business owners that were bringing in 1 million to 2.49 million in revenue in non-employer businesses. And that's census lingo for they don't have any W-2s. So they actually could have more than one owner. It could be a partnership or a family business where they're all owners. But basically they were one-person businesses. And I write about the freelance economy. And like you, I know a lot of business owners. I didn't know many that were even anywhere near that ballpark. And I thought, wow, this is really interesting. So I wrote a blog post about it, and readers started writing to me and saying, I want to know more about them. What are they doing? So I followed up with some profiles of entrepreneurs in the industries I had identified them in using the census data, and that post went completely viral. It has over 300,000 page views. People were super curious about it, and they were very generous in telling their stories, and in very interesting industries. One fellow is in Canada. He is a personal trainer, and he created a network of personal trainers that he turned into a franchise, but they're all independent contractors with their own business. Another person he started a spy camera store online. He had been a retail clerk making $11 an hour at a spy camera store, learned all about spy camera stores, and then started his own online, though. No brick and mortar aspect to it. There was a woman who runs a babysitting service. I recently spoke with her. She's up to 2,500 babysitters, and she's a one-woman $1 million business. I mean, they're all over the map in terms of what they do, but they run the businesses a certain way that enables them to scale their revenue and have the lifestyle that you're talking about, where they're peaceful and happy and not stressed.
But Elaine, why are there so many of the 25 million plus small businesses in America? Why are there so many that are not doing this? Why are there so many printers who have to go to work every day and breathe in fumes from printing machines who absolutely hate what they do? Why is small business so hard historically? And then there's this new development that is making it seem as though small business isn't as hard as it once was.
Matt, there are two reasons that I can identify. One is nobody teaches us how to run a business. A lot of people aren't exposed to anybody who runs a business. And when I have four children in school, no one teaches them that this is even a career option, that you could have a business. It's all focused on go to college,
Yeah.
get a job, work for someone else. So if you're not exposed to an entrepreneur who's maybe a parent or a neighbor or someone in your community and talk to them about it, you're not going to know how to do it. The other thing is that people don't really know what's possible sometimes. They just sort of fall into starting a business. A lot of people start a business because they lost their job. They need to do something, and they're like, "Oh, I know how to mow lawns," or I know how to do whatever it is.
Yeah.
And they teach themselves as they go along. They don't really have a community of other people they can learn from. And that was one reason I wrote the book. These folks were very open, and I thought if I can show what they did, it will actually help people, because they'll learn how to do whatever they're doing a little bit better, make it more profitable, and have less stress. I don't think any business is easy to run. Even these businesses, it's not like these folks never have a hard day's work in their life. They work very hard to get them set up so that they are $1 million one person businesses. But because they're so efficient in how they run, they do have a lot of time for the other things in their life that they enjoy, whether it's their family, mountain biking, whatever. They have the time that a lot of business owners do not have.
Yeah, that stuff I never have time for that stuff. I never have. I can't even imagine the see my interpretation of business is that it must be difficult. It must not be easy, otherwise it is not worth it. And so I am an old school guy. I'm 49 years old. I graduated college in 91. I think I come from the old school way of doing business. And one of the biggest challenges I have is to be able to be open to learn from 21, 22, 23-year-old people who see business very different than I see it. In fact, they see that the ability to jump rungs on the ladder of success is extremely possible. I thought every rung had to be climbed, and it had to be grueling and difficult all the way. So, but yet you picked the number in your book, $1 million one person business. You picked the number of $1 million. Why is the $1 million number some sort of a threshold that does begin to lend credence to freedom and lifestyle and happiness and all that stuff, Elaine? Why $1 million?
Well, you're a business owner, so you will understand this. But if anyone's listening who doesn't have a business, what you have to understand is there's overhead for these businesses, and they pay high taxes. And so when all is said and done, what I found is what they were really taking home is maybe between 200 and 400,000. And if you live in a major metro area, I know in New York City, I remember speaking with a relocation consultant. He said if you make 75,000 in Manhattan, Kansas, is the same as making 225,000 in Manhattan, New York. So it sounds like a lot if you live in a low cost of living state, but for people that are in California, the Boston area, the really expensive metro areas, it winds up being not that much. It winds up being enough to support a family, but you're not going to be rolling in money either. I thought my take on people and money is most people aren't trying to become the next billionaire. Mm-hmm. They would be happy being comfortable, not being worried about how are they going to send their kids to college, how are they going to retire. Oh, I went on vacation, now it's on my credit card. They want to be above that level of worry, but I don't think that they necessarily aspire to be a multimillionaire or a billionaire. So this number will get them to that point where they're not worried about money, mm-hmm. and they have some freedom. And this is probably the baseline where you really need to get to, because otherwise you're always kind of scrambling for the next project.
I'm glad you said that, because I agree 1,000% with that attribution of if it's $1 million in revenue and you're pulling 50, or let's just say in the example you gave of 20 to 40% margin, so you're pulling cost of goods sold and all in of 60 or 70%, you're pulling 300. It's probably more than what you could make working for someone else. And it is a reasonable level. In my book, the publisher made me take out this piece. They thought this piece was alienating to the American public, but they're wrong about it. But I acquiesced and did it anyway, because I didn't know what the hell I was doing when it came to writing a book for a major publisher, right? I mean,
I'm sure you knew more than you thought. So they didn't want you to discuss the idea of profits.
No, this concept this concept. I believe life begins at $150,000 a year. Life gets better at $250,000 a year, and life gets real good at $500,000. And those are the numbers. Now, look, it just means you got a better life in Manhattan, Kansas than you do necessarily in Manhattan, New York. But those are the numbers. And so people, to what you were saying, people are clouding their minds as to these numbers that they're chasing. And I believe most people are chasing these numbers that are too low. And that happens because we live in what I call false positive, where we actually believe we're doing better than we really are. And when you start to equate retirement and college, tuition and select schools and going out to dinner and date nights and jewelry for certain anniversaries and all that sort of stuff, we need a heck of a lot more money than we think.
I think you're right about that, Matt. And the other thing a lot of people don't realize if they have not gone into business is healthcare is very expensive. And even, the Affordable Care Act made it a little more accessible to people. But even with that, a lot of people got high deductible plans where they're responsible for a lot of out of pocket. I know we bought healthcare for my family in New Jersey for a long time. My husband and I were both self-employed for a 10-year period. And at its worst, we were paying $38,000 a year in premiums. And I remember telling that to an Uber driver, and he said, "Oh my gosh, that's more than I make." Yeah. And I thought, you know what, the median U.S. income, I think, is $59,000. Is that right? I think.
I know it is family of four is 51.
Okay, so that's a lot of somebody's income.
Yeah, it's right? Impossible. So, it doesn't exist. They don't have health insurance.
Yeah, and so you have to make more to be able to afford that, and you really should have health insurance, because if you have something go wrong health-wise, it can really bankrupt you. Then there's the issue of cash flow. You need to have enough cash flow to invest in the business, and if you don't have enough income and profits, revenue and profits, you won't have that. Plus, what if you're doing contract work and your contracts dry up? You don't get unemployment. You might make the same amount, pay the same amount of taxes as your neighbor who is in a W-2 job, but there's no safety net for you. So you have to build your own safety net. And it's something people don't really think about if they've been an employee, because all this has been set up by an employer. But we're getting to a society now where a lot of people are part of the freelance or self-employed economy, and they don't have access to these things. And society hasn't really caught up. We haven't put into place any protections for the people that are self-employed. So if you want to do this, you have to be realistic and say, I've got to build that for myself. And people, that's what causes people to prematurely go back into a job, is they don't understand how much they really need to make. And then all of a sudden it catches up with them and they're like, oh my gosh, I can't pay my bills. Like, I better get a job. And then they lose out on going after their dream and the freedoms that if you just got a little bit past that point, you would have.
And what you're just referencing, Elaine, is you're supporting the argument of where this $1 million number comes from, right? Because all of that does become a lot more attainable at $1 million in rev than it does at $150,000 in rev. Because listen, I mean, I see it in the finance business. I'll have a new sales guy who'll come in and we're looking at a deal for a trucker, and he'll say, "Oh, the guy's bank statements are strong," and I'll say, "Great, let me see the bank statements." And the guy will have like $14,000 a month in deposits and $2,000 in average bank balance. And I'll say, "Well, hey, tell me why this was strong bank statements." He's like, "Well, the guy's putting $14,000 in." I'm like, "Dude, it's $14,000 times 12, and he's trying to buy a $150,000 truck. The request for credit is greater than the revenue of the company. The only strength in this bank statement is that it's better than your bank statement. That's the only reason you think it's strong." As far as a business, it still sucks. Right? I mean, let's keep it real, and people don't realize that. The reality is, with $1 million in revenue at a 20, 30, 40% margin, you can create the opportunity that is equal to or slightly better than what you could make somewhere else. Because if you can do $1 million in revenue, and Elaine, I love your comments on this, and tell me if I'm right or wrong. If you can do $1 million in revenue, you understand value creation, you understand problem solving, you understand some form of marketing or niche creation, and therefore you could deliver tremendous value to an employer as well and probably move up the ranks. Because if you can't do all that stuff, you're not going to have $1 million business.
You're right. I mean, a lot of the people I interviewed had worked in corporate America, or maybe not corporate jobs, but in jobs of some sort. And I'm sure they could easily go into a company if they wanted to, but they don't want to,
Yeah.
and they don't have to, and they have built their insulation against have to, which is a lot of people are like, they're forced into everything that has to do with making a living. They almost have no agency over their own lives because they really have not thought at all about the money. And I have to say, I'm a writer. I didn't go into what I do to run a business. And there are a lot of people like me. I love writing. I was writing in kindergarten. I was the editor of my high school newspaper. This is who I am. I can't help it. I probably can't do anything else, right? And there's a lot of people like me, that it's like they love hairstyling, or they love graphic design, or they love being a massage therapist or a hypnotist, or whatever they do. That's why they do the business, and the business is kind of an afterthought. But what happens is, to be sustainable and keep living that life, they have to think about it, and it can be overwhelming. Honestly, I think, like what you're talking about with margins, I think a lot of people listening to this conversation were having might start to feel a little anxious, like, oh my goodness, I don't even understand what they're talking about. This is really unfamiliar. But it's not that complicated, and I tried to simplify it in the book so that people could, just by focusing on revenue alone simplifies it, because once you get the revenue there, as long as you're not spending more than you bring in, you're going to have a profit. So it gets people past the point where they are, which might be not thinking about money at all. And you do have to think a little bit about it, or you just won't be allowed to do what you want in life by life. You won't have a sustainable life.
It's the premise of my book. My book is based on the story. We lost my brother-in-law, my wife's only brother. He died at 46, and he left a wife and 4 kids with no health insurance, no life insurance, and $100 in the bank. That's the genesis of my book. And it just was the ultimate wake-up call for me that we can never rest on this desire to accumulate more income. And that argument gets treated as greed. It gets treated as, look at this bad guy, this money-hungry guy. And my response to all those haters on social is, when that happens to you, and even though you're hating on me, I hope it never happens to you. But when it happens to you, you'll see I was 100% right. That you can never have enough money to be able to fully protect yourself against emergencies that are out of your control. And I saw it firsthand in the war. I'm not talking about emergencies of competition or regulation changes. I'm talking about real life and death. Health came out of the blue scare emergencies. And so money is so important to me. It should be important to everybody. And I know that we're sharing the same philosophy. You're actually adding probably a little bit more of what I call in the book lifestyle by design. You're saying the business can trigger this life. And I'm trying to get people to see it that way too, but for me, it doesn't exist. Literally, I do not get happy 90% of the time. And most people would say, well, that's a really terrible way to live. And I disagree, because it means I'm insanely happy 10% of the time. It means I can relish the 10% that I am more so than the 90 I'm not. I'm not looking for 50-50 happiness or 90-10 happiness. I'm looking for 90% unhappiness, grit, toughness, anger, constant state of pissed offness, and just bliss for 10%. Does that sound crazy to you?
Well, it sounds kind of hard. But first of all, I'm very sorry to hear what your family went through. And I think that it's very generous of you, when you have something that personal, to put it in a book and share it with people, because you had some really powerful lessons there. And you're raising an interesting point, which is that money in itself is not what is important. At least it isn't to me. And I don't think most people are sitting there counting every dollar in the bank, keeping score in that way. But it does protect your family, and it protects the life that you want. So you do have to think about it, or if you're really not inclined to think about it, get the help in that you need. Some of the people in the book outsource a lot. In fact, almost all of them do. And, they bring in a bookkeeper, they bring in a good accountant. A lot of small business owners are do-it-yourselfers. And for me personally, doing my bookkeeping, it causes me agony and pain. I don't enjoy it. I'm glad when the books are nice and neat, but I finally got a bookkeeper, and I cannot tell you
Yeah.
what a blessing that is to
Right.
know I just send all the stuff off to her.
Yeah.
I have to look it over, but it's entered properly. And then, when I went to do my taxes, I just had nice, clean books, a nice balance sheet to give to the accountant. He was able to work efficiently. It's such a blessing. I got a financial planner for my family. We had been kind of do-it-yourselfers on that. And I do some content writing, that sort of thing. And sometimes it's for financial planners. And after talking to so many of them, I said, I'm crazy for not having one, because there's no way I can do as well as they can. This is what they do 24/7. I'm not going to invest my money the way a professional would. So let me trust somebody else. And I realize this is an area of weakness for me, where I can do so much better with help. Whereas I'm not going to outsource my writing or something like that, because that's my highest value proposition. And that's what the thinking that a lot of these owners had, is like, where do I bring the most value? What should I spend my time on? Really moves the business forward. Sometimes it's taking time away from the business. And Matt, maybe this this might add to your 10%. I found that they were very good about saying, you know what, I'm not going to work this day. I'm going to go to a retreat with other entrepreneurs and surround myself with really smart people and get ideas from them. Like you were saying, you like to learn from the younger generation. I do too, actually. I find even from my kids, I learn a lot about business, because they're digital natives. They're never gonna think of technology in the same way that I do, because they grew up with it. But getting out of your office, being around other stimulating, interesting, challenging people, they invest in business coaching a lot. And that seems like one of these extras, or it's touchy feely or flaky. It's not. They work with very good coaches who push them out of their comfort zone and challenge all the thinking that keeps people in that maybe $250,000 to $500,000 range, where you're still kind of scrambling. If you're in a professional services firm, you're still basically in a high-paying job that you've created for yourself, and they will put themselves on the line in these relationships. So they have to grow past that. And there's not like a little formula that the coaches follow, but it's all these inputs that make their thinking expand and make them do things differently than the average business owner. And I think a lot of times business owners feel like, oh, it might be selfish to take the time for myself, or I can't afford the money to go do this. But it really isn't, because it's going to help your family. And there are low-key ways to do this. You could go to a meetup for free, learn from people there. There are online groups. If you can't afford to go to a conference or something like that, maybe you can't the first 5 years of the business, but you do have to surround yourself with other people that think a little bigger than you, that do things better than you. And sometimes you have to put your ego aside and say, I need a coach.
Yeah, I think most times people need to do that. The great speaker Jim Rohn used to say, you can't see the picture when you're inside the frame.
Oh, that's, yeah.
And I think
great. Everyone loves him. He's so inspiring.
He was way ahead of his time too. I mean, Jim Rohn was a slap you around motivational guy in the 70s and 80s. Right now, it's almost commonplace. But early, I mean, he was so early in that in-your-face mindset that it almost alienated him in a lot of ways. And there was a long period of time in my career I didn't like Jim Rohn, and now I think he's one of the greatest of all time. But Elaine, I'd like to give some really fundamental, and we've given practical information, but I'd love to almost do it in a bullet point type fashion. What are the common traits that the data has told you and the interviews have told you of this? And are we calling these people solopreneurs? Is that a reasonable acronym or a reasonable nomenclature for the type of people highlighted in your book?
I would say the vast majority. There were a couple of partnerships, like a husband and wife team or two brothers and that sort of thing. But for the most part, they were one-person businesses, solo entrepreneurs.
And so if you would give me 3-4 personality traits that represent, that are synonymous with the people that you interviewed and studied for the book.
I would say their personalities are all over the map. I've met a lot of them at this point and know them. Um, what is different is how they think about their business. So one of the common practices is automation. Now, these are not new ideas. Everyone's heard of automation. They didn't invent automation, but they really take the time to put the systems in place to automate all of the tedious tasks in their business. And this is one thing where we all know we should do it, but when you have to do the setup for these things, like setting up your CRM, usually you can't just use a CRM. You've got to take the little classes they have. A lot of people never get to that point. They're like, oh, it's a busy work day, I'll do it tomorrow. And then 10 years later, they wake up and they have no mailing list. These
Yeah.
people make the time to do it because they're like, I need it. It is important for me to step away from my business if I don't have these things in place. They will use contractors too, or freelancers. They don't try to do everything themselves. We touched on that with the bookkeepers, but they do it often to a greater extent than many businesses. They continually reevaluate and say, okay, I have all this in place and I want to introduce this new product. Like, why am I doing my own audio on my podcast? I should have somebody doing that. Or, just constantly looking for new things to take off their plate. And they will invest in good people. They're not afraid to spend some money on the business. I think that's a differentiating factor. There are a lot of business owners that really don't invest in their business at all. They just don't want to invest in it. They're afraid to, or they feel they don't have the cash flow. But if you have business coming in, you usually can outsource something to a contractor. Then the next degree of this would be outsourcing. So some of the people are e-commerce stores, and they'll use fulfillment by Amazon, or
Sure.
they use drop shipping. There's some people that use back office services. So Chris Cadigan runs Unishippers of Oyster Bay on Long Island in New York, and he actually was using a back office service to be like his admin and invoicing, etc. He wound up actually buying the back office service, so now he runs it too. But he was a one-man franchise, and you would think, okay, in a franchise you're not allowed to change the systems, but he actually had some flexibility within the structure. Harry Ein at Perfection Promo, he's a $4 million one-man business operating from his garage. He's a young dad. He's got a little boy. He coaches all kinds of things for his son with sports. He sells swag, those tote bags that have a company name on them, pens,
Hmm.
etc. And he uses something called I Promote You. He did some research and he found it in his industry. I Promote You does the back office for swag sellers, right? This is very specialized. It's not like you ask your next door neighbor, hey, anybody who does back office for swag sellers? He had a network in his industry. But when he found that out, what he did was he used the service to a small extent for a while. And then as his business grew, he started using it more. And as he uses it more, he pays more for it, but it pays for itself because when he's using that to do his invoicing, he's out meeting with enterprise clients who place big orders, and he's making sure that they know he loves having their business, so they want to work with him even more. And that's the kind of high value thing they're very, very good about focusing on. I interviewed a new entrepreneur I haven't written about, but I'm going to write about her for Forbes. She runs it's over a $2 million business now, with a Pinterest course. She was a graphic designer who got into Pinterest marketing, and it's an area that at the time not a lot of people knew how to do. She started a course. She used to be a teacher, so she was a good yeah, she's good at teaching the course. And she said one thing that she noticed about herself, because I've been asking people, like, what traits do you think you have that made you $1 million one person business? And she said, I finish projects that I start.
Yeah. She
And I
closes the circle. She can close the circle.
yeah, and I thought, you know what, that is something that trips people up. They have things that are sort of lingering and be done, and you don't have a saleable product if you're creating a product or a service. If it just bumps along and bumps along, and we all get caught in that because you have the demands of cash flow. You got to pay your bills. A client has an emergency, but they're very good at staying focused. And it's an occupational hazard of being an entrepreneur, having lots of ideas going off in all different directions, but they know how to rein that in a bit, and think about, okay, what am I really trying to do here? What's important? What do I need to do to move the needle forward this week? In fact, one of the entrepreneurs, Laszlo Nadler, he's a $2 million business, one man business in New Jersey. He sells paper planners, like those day books that you write down what is your to-do list on Amazon. And he focused it on what is the one thing I need to do this week to move me towards my life's biggest goal, right? So this is exactly how he thinks, and even created a product around it.
Mm.
But he doesn't waste a lot of time on low value to-dos that really don't get him anywhere.
Yeah, they know their superpower. They know what their primary strength is, right? And they spend no
Yeah,
time
that's
on
a
it.
good way to put it. Yeah, and and I would say it's not like they're born this way and they just know it all from the moment they wake up in life. They learn it. They learn it, and they do go off on tangents, some stop themselves, and they course correct instead of feeling like it's a failure. They try something different. There's one couple, Camille and Ben Arneberg, who run an Amazon store called Willow and Everett, and I think they're both still in their 20s. He was in the military, and she worked in corporate social sustainability. It was very meaningful, but she didn't like corporate life, and so she wound up looking for business they could both do together. And they're both very athletic. She's also a personal trainer. So they started selling running compression sleeves. Those are those little bands
Yeah.
on your arm that hold things. The business didn't do well. And so they said, okay, we learned from that. Instead of feeling like, oh, we failed and we have to go back into our jobs, they said, let's try something different. What else can we both do? And they loved entertaining and having parties at their house. So they said, let's put up a little Amazon store with home decorating things that you would use at a party, like decanters and mugs and that type of thing. And they ordered, I think it was like 6 or 7 items from a private label maker, put them up on the site, and then they saw which ones sold and which ones didn't, and they discounted the ones that weren't selling to kind of unload them and reinvest in the business, and the ones that were, they doubled down on. And they had put like $5,000 in capital into the business, and when they did that, they looked at it like they would have spent that much on a college course. So even if they lost the whole $5,000, they would have gotten something out of it. Now, I think that's a differentiating factor for these types of entrepreneurs, because I get a lot of letters from people that have read my articles, and they're like, I want to start a business, but I need a government grant to start it.
Right, right,
It's
right.
like,
Sure.
if
Yeah.
you can't come up with any money, how are you going to run a business? I mean, you can't expect other people, I think, to pay for your business. I mean, you can get investors. It could be your parents or your friends, or you could do a Kickstarter campaign. But if you're really unwilling to put any of your own resources on the line, then how do you really expect to run a business? You won't be able to. These folks will take some risk, because the bottom line with any business is there's risk. There's no cookie cutter 5 steps to starting $1 million business, and you do these things and you will have 1 million. I mean, it's not like that. You have to, you got to put your mind into it. You've got to react in real time to real world situations that are going on. New technologies come out all the time. You have to be paying attention to those to see if they'll help you. There might be market forces. You can't go into it really thinking, like you were saying, it's not easy. But if you're willing to put your own resources into it and your mental powers into it, there's a lot you can accomplish, and these folks did.
So, Elaine, I've made copious notes here as we're talking about. Really, I have, because I think, oddly enough, I think there's tremendous similarities between the two books. I force the issue to my readers of the wake-up call, which is the first part of the book. But systematically, a lot of the things we're talking about, of the success of the people that you've interviewed for your book and experience in your own life, is a lot of the roadmap, which is the second part of my book. And so I wrote down, in this order: mindset, ability to automate, ability to outsource, the reinvestment back into the business, clearly defining their superpower, working within a niche, and beta testing. Those are the sort of bullet points that I wrote down just off of your last explanation. Would you say that those are appropriate for what are common in the people that you're seeing building these $1, $2, $3 million very small employee-based businesses?
Yes, and it's so interesting for me, Matt, when I see an entrepreneur interpret the same information, because you brought a lot to it also in terms of just distilling down what they do differently. The other thing I didn't say, but I should say this, is they're connectors and they're very generous with information.
Hmm.
No one person business exists in a vacuum. There, even, you think of a big corporation and there are a lot of stakeholders. There are a lot of stakeholders in a micro business too. And these folks are very good at reaching out to other people. One of the original entrepreneurs, Saul Orwell, sent me a tweet on Twitter, and we started a conversation that way, and then that led to my writing an article about him, and he connected me to a lot of the entrepreneurs in the book.
Mm.
I found that they were not close to the vest at all about their business. Sometimes you have people who they have a business plan, for instance, and they'll say, oh, you have to sign an NDA before I even tell you about it. Usually those are the people whose business is never going to go anywhere because they don't understand execution,
They
right?
don't
I mean,
understand that there's
like,
enough to go around too. It's a
oh,
big
exactly.
world, you know.
Yeah,
And we're only talking about one slide. We're talking about 1 million or 2 million in revenue to get the lifestyle design that we're looking for. And it's so silly. So many people protect these small little nuts like little squirrels, you know. It's
well,
crazy.
they don't understand that no one else, like no one else would execute it the way they do. So you could give that plan to someone else and they could
Yeah.
try to follow it and they would interpret it differently. So it doesn't matter. And these people get it. So they put themselves out there.
Yeah.
They expose their ideas to the world. They don't care if someone else tries to copy them because they know their strength as an individual business owner is different than the Amazons of the world. One of the business brokers I interviewed for the book, David Fairley, talked about that, how, how do you compete in an Amazon store, an e-commerce store against the Amazons of the world? Well, you do it by being a curator of something you know really well.
Yeah.
And he was giving me these wacky examples like fairy figurines and muck boots and decorative mailbox flags. These were all businesses he has sold, right? And you think, okay, like I'm not really interested in decorative mailbox flags, but somewhere in the world there probably is someone, and there are probably people that have hundreds of these flags at their house for every occasion, right? And so if you're
Great
that
idea.
person,
Super
yeah,
idea.
so you that's your strength,
Yeah.
and so they get that their strength is like their blog that only they can write, or their personality on Instagram, or they're speaking, and them that people like to do business with a person.
But Elaine, let's talk about the drama. Let's talk about some of the people who you thought were going to make it into your book because they had the $1 million business and you were referred to them, etc. And then they absolutely crashed and burned. Give me the 3-4 things that the people that were on track to pull this lifestyle by design off, and then they got off track. What happened?
That's a good question. There actually wasn't anybody like that. There was one person who I wanted to include in the book who became scarce, and I didn't hear from him again. But things happen. And as a reporter, I never make any assumptions about what he could have been traveling, he could have been ill. I don't know. There was a mystery as to why he never reappeared. But hopefully, I'll hear from him again. But
Well, can you get his stuff on Amazon anymore? I mean, or is it all gone?
it was in professional services,
Gotcha.
so.
Is the website still up? I mean,
Yeah, it seems like the business is still running. So who knows? Some people are shy. They don't like to. They maybe the media exposure initially was personally challenging. There are people that they want to be in an article and then they feel a little self-conscious afterwards. So who knows? I don't know.
I've experienced that with my book, by the way.
Oh, did you?
I did. I experienced that with one of the people I reference in the book. It strained my friendship. He was incredibly supportive until the book came out, and then he has shut down and not been nearly as supportive since the book came out. It's an unfortunate circumstance because it was a completely from left field. I never anticipated that to happen, but it did happen.
Well, sometimes I found at one point my husband's a real estate appraiser, and I was helping him to write a blog. I thought it would be something helpful for his business, and we did a few blogs together, and he doesn't even, I think he has a LinkedIn profile now, but he has almost no footprint on anything digitally. He likes his privacy a lot. And he said, Elaine, I feel so exposed. I don't want to do this anymore. I thought and it was so impersonal. It was really just about the valuation of your home. So I realized there's people that just don't like being out there in public. They're just
Totally.
media shy. I'm not, because I've been in this field for so long. I don't publish personal things on the internet. I'm pretty media savvy, of course, because I'm a journalist. So I don't put things up there. I don't want the whole world to know. And I think for some people, it feels like they're putting out their most personal information, even if they're just providing impersonal stuff about a business. Sometimes also, I think there are people that they have trouble acknowledging that they're business people. They don't like people to think that they are in the business of earning money. People have all kinds of weird hang-ups
Totally. They
about
do
money.
over money,
And I've
major.
seen that sometimes, especially, in businesses that involve caring for other people, for instance, or that have sort of a social component. I think people feel a little hesitant to sort of say, you know what, I want to do all these good things, but I also need to support my family and make a living. They feel like there's something wrong about it, and that may discourage them also. But what I'll say, with in terms of overall, because I've interviewed thousands of entrepreneurs over my career, why do they fail? They fail sometimes because they're waiting for someone else to tell them what to do. The people that succeed. When I was at Fortune Small Business Magazine for 5 years, I ran a business plan competition that was it was an all-star competition. So every school that participated could send one team that won their business plan competition. So Harvard Business School would send one,
Mm.
Cornell Business School, University of Michigan, et cetera, and they would all compete. We had really good judges: Ann Winblad, Kay Koplovitz, Michael Greeley, big name venture capitalists who were really tough judges. And the students who won and the students who are still in business today were always the ones who figured out some way to generate revenue at the time of the competition. They did something, even if they just made a few sales on campus. They went out and they made it happen. They didn't have the perfect circumstances. They didn't have the perfect office. They were operating from a dorm room. They didn't really have any startup capital, but they somehow
Could
made
sell.
it happen
Yeah.
enough that you could see it's a real business.
So how important is selling to the client, to the people that you've interviewed for your book? How important was their ability to convince others or sell their product?
Oh, it's the most important thing that they could do, right? If you can't sell, you have no business. So they weren't all salesy people. In fact, I would say a lot of them are introverts, and a lot of them have no sales background, but they would find a way to sell that was comfortable for them. And one example would be Megan Telpner. She is a nutritionist. She was actually working in advertising, and she in her early 20s went on a trip to Africa, became very ill, and discovered she had Crohn's disease. Didn't like the way that the medical system treats that, and felt she could heal herself with nutrition. So she started changing her lifestyle, quit this stressful career, did a lot of things in tandem. And then she went back to school to become a nutritionist. She started blogging about nutrition and her unique take on all of this, that you can heal yourself with a better diet. Thought the same way.
I got you. So we had a little bit of a lag there
Yeah,
just
I
for a
saw that.
second.
That's why I
Yeah.
was pausing there for a moment. Yeah, and so she every single day, 7 days a week for like 4 years, she blogged, and she just mentioned to me recently in a conversation that she looked back at some of those blogs, and now she does them much differently. But it didn't matter, because she built a following around that of people. It was very genuine. It was what she really felt. She had the expertise, and that's what, when she introduced her first product, the 3-day green smoothie fast for $10, right? She was really excited because she made $1,000 in sales at the time. But those were the people who bought it. And
Yeah,
then
of
when she
course.
scaled up, now she's almost at 2 million. She runs something called the Academy of Culinary Nutrition. It's an online school for people that want to learn how she cooks, and they might be lay people, they might be nutritionists who want to help their clients, but it built up slowly. It was like a 10-year overnight success story, but that was her sales method. And she uses affiliate marketing and other things too now, but that wasn't what she used in the beginning.
So Elaine, let me ask the most important question as we close. Are these people happier? are they happier with these businesses, or do you see that they are like so many small business owners, which are really stuck in the pain side of their small business?
Well, when you're interviewing people as a journalist, you really never know what's going on in their personal life. So in terms of knowing their happiness level, I don't know. There are people that can be very public people but have a lot of pain. But my observation is they seem pretty happy. They protect a lot of their time.
Yeah.
Laszlo Nadler, for instance, he lives in my area, and every once in a while I'll get together with him and catch up. He has daddy-daughter day on a weekday, right? And I've gone canoeing with his family and my family. He seems like a very happy man, he does.
Yeah.
And a lot of them do seem happy. There was one entrepreneur, Justin Goff, who I saw blogged on Medium, I think it was, where when he hit his first million, he was surprised it didn't make him happier.
Yeah.
And he felt like some of the pain points in his life had not gone away.
Yeah.
And he wrote, I thought it was very candid that entrepreneurs often do suffer from depression. Sometimes there can be a letdown after you hit a big goal.
Yeah.
And in fact, there's a whole chapter in the book where I looked at people that kind of got to roadblocks, and maybe they weren't so happy or they felt stuck. And a lot of times they would bring in somebody else, like a coach, to help them. And I think the good coaches understand there's an emotional component to business and a lifestyle component. It's not just all like roll up your sleeves and attack the business and get the biggest revenue kitty you can. You're the biggest resource when you're a one-person business, so you have to take care of yourself. People don't always do it right away, but these folks seem to be pretty good at doing it eventually, so that it doesn't go completely downhill if they do hit a bump.
I think it's a really powerful concept in your book, the $1 million one-person business, because there is this huge chasm between small business owners and real business owners. And that chasm is getting greater and greater and greater. And what is the differentiator there? It's revenue. And so the big companies are getting bigger. The medium-sized companies are getting squeezed. And the small revenue companies, $1 million or below, $2 million or below, whatever we want to use as that threshold, have perhaps the greatest opportunity of all of them. And for people who have that itch, that thing that just doesn't go away, it's that it gnaws at them every day they have to go get up and go work for somebody else. That idea that they pitched and it didn't get implemented, and it keeps coming back and no one's solving it. It has never been better for those people to go and launch. And you're right. They can get to $1 million in sales, and they can run at a 20, 30, 40% margin, and they can probably get it pretty close to autopilot, and they can have a very nice, happy life. It wasn't for me. That is not the route that I wanted to go, right? I wanted much larger numbers. And for that, by the way, that window, I think, to do what I've done is closing for people. I really think the chasm is either must be very large, hundreds and hundreds of millions, or you must be relatively small, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 million. Somewhere in that 20 to 100 million range is where it is the most vicious and dangerous to live. But that's what's powerful about your book.
Well, thank you. I think you're raising an interesting point, which is you have to know yourself. I mean, some people just love the challenge of scaling the business as far as they can take it. And if that's what excites you in life, I was actually the collaborator with Vern Harnish on the book Scaling Up. I'm
love
not
Vern
against.
Harnish.
Oh, he's an incredible mentor to me and to so many people.
Yeah.
If you love scaling, scale. Sometimes when I was fact checking the book, I'd call people and they said, Elaine, I'm so sorry. I'm not a one-person business anymore. I hired my first employee, and I was excited for them. I'm not disappointed because a business is like a family. It's a living, breathing organism. Things change. You have to adapt to it. And if you have an opportunity, why not scale? But the majority of business owners never will scale And I think it's not an accident. It's not like they just failed. A lot of them like a lifestyle business. They just need to make more money
Totally.
at it so they can really enjoy the lifestyle. Like there are
Totally.
people like me. I have 4 children. Ages 7 to 14, I want a certain amount of freedom in my schedule to do things with them. I just want that. I don't want to scale my business with employee because I would then have the responsibility of managing them.
Hmm.
And, it wouldn't work out at this moment in time. Will that change at some point when my kids are older? It might,
Hmm.
and for someone else, it might be totally different. They may have no children, but they love to travel,
Yeah.
and they like Sol Orwell, he travels 3 or 4 months out of the year, and he has a business where he sells reports on nutritional supplements online that's run mostly by a contractor who has equity, right? So he travels all over the world. He does these bake offs called cookie offs to raise money for charity. He just did one recently. He's quite successful with raising money for charity. He's got a great life, totally different life than mine,
Yeah.
but he wants the same types of things from a life, like the freedom
Yep.
from a lifestyle business. So you have to really know yourself, and there's no right or wrong in terms of what size your business should be. I think the one person businesses have been kind of told they're wrong. Like, you're not ambitious enough. You didn't read the E-Myth. If only you hired employees, you would be scaling. It's not for everybody. I think you want to, if you want to be in business at all, you find the type of business you like, and then you decide year to year whether you grow it or not.
But there is a requirement in business, and that requirement in business is the requirement for clarity. A business owner must have clarity because the grayness, the abyss that most small business owners is hell. They have to know I'm good with being a one-person operator or I must be a 100-person operator. But that middle, that variance, that 1 foot on the dock, 1 foot on the boat is disastrous. The requirement is of clarity. I have a small world story for you on Vern Harnish. I started my company in 1995, so we're 23 years in business. And in 99, I got accepted into this program called Birthing of Giants.
Oh, yeah. So you have good company with Infusionsoft and some other really.
It was incredible, but that was 99. I was there at MIT, 99, 2000, and 2001, and Vern Harnish was the leader of it at that time. And I was so insecure about my business, and we were so small and so struggling that all I did was BS my way for 3 years at that place. In fact, if I could do it all over again, and I actually talk about it in my book, I would have stood up when we all introduced ourselves, and I would have said, somebody screwed up on my application. They misread. There's no reason I'm here. I've taken someone's spot. There was someone more deserving of me, right? And I would have learned more, and I would have put more into place. And because I was so thick-headed and so insecure, I probably wasted a decade of my career because I had it staring me in front of me, and I was so thick-headed and insecure that I couldn't even see it to put it into play when I came back. And so I got a redo of Birthing of Giants 2 years ago, and I got to do it all over again. And it's the first thing that I led with was, let me tell you guys something. The most important thing you can take from this is the ability to be real and transparent of exactly where your business is. Isn't that
So
cool?
well, yeah. I mean, it's not often in life you get a do-over. So that
It was
must have been
awesome.
really wonderful. Yeah, and that program has affected so many businesses. I'm always impressed by years later how much of an impact it really had.
Yeah, you know Norm Brodsky?
I don't know Norm. No,
Okay.
I know who he is though. Yeah.
Yeah, so he was one of the speakers originally at that. I talk about Norm in the book too, how we rekindled our relationship 15 years later, and how he helped me with a lot of things. So that Birthing of Giants thing is incredible. And Vern Harnish is, yeah, I mean, he's the preeminent mind in that space. Wouldn't we agree? I mean, he's top 1, 2, 3 minds in that space.
Yeah, he really is the expert on scaling. I mean, it's incredible to work with him because of the way that he thinks.
Yeah, it's great. Elaine, thank you for being on the program. Thanks for writing the book, $1 Million, One Person Business. I think there's so many correlations between our two books and the roadmap that we're playing out. And I challenge the audience today to really take what Elaine has talked about, particularly when I recapped the 9 bullet points. You finished those, Elaine, which I thought was very interesting. And it's true that this openness, this transparency, this desire to network and exchange is a true characteristics of the most successful people. Big businesses or small business, it is a key factor.
Well, you just had a wonderful story about that with your own life about transparency. I can't wait to read your book, man. I am going to pick that up next as for my next book I read.
That's awesome. I'll send you a copy of it, Elaine. So no problem. We'll get you a copy of it. And thanks for your support. I want to do the same with your book. So Elaine's book is $1 million one-person business. Elaine, is Penguin the publisher of that? Is it Penguin Random House?
It's okay. Random House, yeah, 10-Speed Press.
Okay, gotcha. So that's awesome. I had a wonderful experience working with those guys as well. They were amazing. I love them.
Yeah, very, very professional, great group of people. They were great.
So Elaine, thanks very, very much. I look forward to seeing you down the road.
Thank you, Matt. It was a pleasure. What a great discussion. I enjoyed it.
Thanks. So did I very much. See ya.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.